How I got involved with human rights activism. Oh wow. I think I was persuaded and um, involved at a very young age, very tender teen years. I got involved in student movement. I got involved, in the ANC. But while I was still part of that, and I think even as a queer person trying to understand the body and the self, you get to realize that the space is also not talking to you. And that's how I voiced, you know, many intersecting issues at a young age, as well as being involved in high school to respond to the HIV epidemic at a time where there was no treatment. So many people were dying in South Africa. And this was happening in front of all of us. So we had to be trained. We had to, be taken to political education, trained for counseling, to respond to the dire pandemic situation that we were dealing with. I got to, volunteer for one of the second oldest organization, LGBTI organization out, when I was still in school in my township, organizing and bringing together support group or safe space for LGBTI people where we can converse, where we can learn from each other. South Africa has a long history of fighting for rights. The colonial legacy also teaches us that because we had colonial laws that violated people because of the color of their skin, violated women, violated LGBTI persons. So that history is entrenched in many of us. And we are a country where we have, the Constitution, that is celebrated globally. I mean, it's one of the most strongest constitution that integrates sexual orientation and gender identity. And over time, that constitution, which is meant to be a lived reality for people, at times has been denied. The human rights situation of LGBTI people in South Africa does change and move with times. We have experienced a spike of hate crimes violation. We've seen, denial of services, but we've also seen stigma and discrimination thrive at times. But I think, we've seen a resilience grow over the last 2 decades, where LGBTI people standing up for their own rights, using the very same judicial system, using the very same constitution to fight for the rights. We've seen, 14 pieces of legislations developed over the last 14 years. And I think, I'm excited with the fact that just a few days ago, the hate crimes law just came into pass in Parliament. So we're waiting for the president's signature. The biggest challenge now, is ensuring that we also prioritize livelihoods and economic justice. It's one thing to fight for the rights, but it's also another thing if whether that person can live to enjoy those rights. More and more LGBTI people are dying poor, homeless, and more LGBTI people don't have access to education. So I think the biggest challenge now, while rights are a priority, but livelihood and health and access to economic opportunity. I think, the rest of the world needs to catch up into the program of building a better world. As South Africa, it became apparent and our responsibility to contribute to the country, but also to contribute to Africa as well as the rest of the world in building better Africa, better world. And I think the rest of the world needs to catch up with that agenda. The UK has direct ties with many of the countries in the Commonwealth because of the British Empire. And the UK cannot divorce itself from this history. So the time that was spent in the past to get to trade, to get to occupy these lands, It's the same time we have to do and build in actually healing and repairing these injustices of the past. And I think it's the obligation and it's the partnership and it's the solidarity of healing the world. The world we want to see is built on peace missions, is built on just mission, but it's also built on trust of rebuilding those relationships. So I think mobilization of the UK people, is the responsibility that we can all build to ensure that it's shared resource, shared visions, shared technical support to build a better world.